Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining DMF. And David, we're really excited to have David Warfel joining us today. He's the founding designer of Light Can Help You. He's an author, an educator, and lighting advisor of ProSource Buying Group, to ProSource Buying Group, and an all-around good guy. I've seen him speak before and was thoroughly impressed. And I hope I haven't built you up too much, David, but I don't think you're going to disappoint. So with that, I'm going to pass on the baton.
Thanks, Russ. All that introduction basically just means is that I talk a lot about lighting and won't shut up, which is maybe the shorter way. You can introduce me that way next time. Here's David. He talks about lighting and won't shut up. So I'm going to talk about the 9 deadly sins here, and I'm going to pull up a few slides just for fun. If I can make the technology work the way I thought it was going to work. There we go. Lighting layout is not lighting design. And I would say the most common reaction we get when we propose lighting design or when one of our integrator partners proposes lighting design is we already have a lighting design. Because they have circles on a plan, they think they have lighting design. The customer thinks they have lighting design. And so this presentation is really just a somewhat tongue-in-cheek approach to a lot of the terrible things we see on other people's lighting designs. And typically what that means is they haven't designed it, they've just put the circles on a plan. So what are those 9 deadly sins? And Carol was asking me this earlier about the lighting in my background, and I'm setting up my office here so that I can demonstrate some of these. And so I'm going to show you the first one that I got working. I've just begun programming it this week. But it's long, it's like I figure out, okay, I'm going to live in this office for, 10 years now before I'm allowed outside. So I might as well make it everything that I need it to be. So what are the 9 deadly sins of lighting layout? Here they are in order, and then I want to talk about them individually. And the 9 deadly sins, if you think about it, in terms of waking up in the morning and going to bed at night, we encounter these every moment of our day, and especially at home, but it's also at work too. And now that many of us are spending a lot of extra time at home, or a lot more time at home, we're faced with these all the time. And what comes up first is 4 cans and a fan, followed by ceiling fan light syndrome. These are the ones that you hear me talk about all the time. They're kind of one of the most common sins. But if you think about it in terms of waking up in your bedroom, this is probably what you have. You have ceiling fan light syndrome or 4 cans and a fan in there. Then you go into your, into the bathroom to get ready for the day, and we have what we call vanity insanity. You go into the closet to pick out your clothes, and we call that perfect shadows when the light is not right. And then you go out to make some coffee, and we have countertop capers. And overhead dependency as you move into the rest of your day, to your office, to your living room, etc. Probably going to spend most of that day in what we call binary existence, meaning you've got on and off. And then if you are trying to relax at the end of the day in the great room, we see a lot of lighting layouts, a lot of plans out there that really suffer from what we call the death of details. And then finally, all of these in some ways add up to geometry versus humanity, choosing geometry over humanity. And these are not necessarily downlight specific, but you can see some downlights in here. And you'll see every time that we move a little thing, it's like me plugging the DRD4 or the DID4 now saying, use the adjustable. That's my favorite DMF fixture. So let's get into these. Ceiling fan light syndrome. I probably don't need to say anything about this because the photograph says everything that it needs to say. I don't want to say lower end market, let's say the common market, right? The most ubiquitous market of residences, we see a lot of ceiling fan light syndrome or CFLS. And if you just have ceiling fan lights, it's advanced CFLS or stage 4 CFLS. And what happens in this is that, if it's in a bedroom and you've got a dresser, then the light is precisely placed where it does you the least good. When you're looking at, say, a piece of art or trying to determine whether your socks are navy or black, it gets a little hard when you're casting a shadow right over it. Now, if you turn around, you go into, say, a living room, then guess what? It's three or four bare light bulbs pointed right at your face in the most common ceiling fan arrangement. This is something that's usually reserved for people on stage, and it's because they're paid to do it. No one else wants a light shining in their face. It's more like that interrogation thing from the bad movies. So ceiling fan light syndrome is something you definitely want to resist. 4 cans and a fan, that's when we move into the multi-million-dollar houses. They say, oh, we're not going to do ceiling fan lights. We don't like those. We're going to do a really nice fan, and we're going to do 4 cans. And 4 cans and a fan is a good way to light a room if you want to light the whole space and don't really care about what happens or who the people are or what furniture is in there or whether anyone's going to live in there or not. It's great for painting the room. It's great for installing the carpet. And in fact, it's so good for installing the carpet that you can see in this sort of standard bedroom layout that the lighting is primarily on the carpet. That's where most of the light in this room is going to go. So I think this is a great approach for toddlers who spend most of their time on the floor, right? If they're playing with blocks and stacking up blocks, then 4 cans and a fan, maybe not so bad for that. But if you outgrow that at some point and you aren't just hanging out on the floor, on the carpet, on the flooring, whatever, 4 cans and a fan starts to fail. So in other words, we outgrow the utility of this in just a couple of years. It doesn't take very long. Another lighting layout problem I see is vanity and sanity. And this one with the, this is like a hall of shame, right? And I'm going to call her out. This is one of my mom's restrooms. And you see she picked out this lovely fixture. And what it does to your face when you put a fixture above the sink like that is it puts the shadows exactly where you don't need them. Right? So it's like waking up in the morning and you go into the bathroom and it's like, oh, this is nice. Why do I feel so old and tired in the morning? Is it because the light is above the sink? And let's see, the last live event I attended before COVID was in Las Vegas. We were staying at the Venetian, and they had a downlight over each sink, which is a real common piece, which is even worse than what than what my mom has. And this is what a downlight over the sink is going to do to you, right? This is what it's going to do to your face. And it's like, okay, now I am in a horror film, and why do we do that? Why do we make it hard to see? Why do we make the shadows under our eyes deeper, the shadows under our chin? Let's take a straight razor to my chin right now, and it might end up being a bloody horror film because of the way the lighting is done in there. So I call that vanity and sanity. And of course, you think about it, all you have to do is put the lights in the right place, in this case on either side, and have them be soft, etc., and you're going to get the right kind of light on your face. Perfect shadows is another one. We call this perfect shadows, and I just grabbed this off of house.com. Somebody was proud enough of this closet that they showed it off. And while it's nice in terms of the storage unit, you can see that, like many, many closets, there is a fixture right in the middle of the room. This is, I'm not really sure who thought this up and how it got stuck. Right? But if you think about what would happen if there was a body in this room, like a person, and stuff on those shelves, and what happens when they're looking at those shelves and the clothing and the shoes and et cetera, on those shelves, that light fixture is perfectly placed to cast shadows right where you don't want shadows and to leave everything else illuminated. In other words, it's like the opposite of what you need. I don't actually need light everywhere when I'm looking at these clothes and trying to decide what to wear. I need light on the clothes. But instead, with perfect shadows, we have light everywhere else and a shadow on the clothes itself. And in this case, it can be solved by moving the lights, putting the lights in the right place, using the right lights. And most of this is about, you know what a good downlight is hopefully, or you're listening to Russ and the rest of the DMF team and learning about that, you know what a good recessed downlight is. If you put it in the wrong place, that's what we call a deadly sin. Here's another one, a countertop caper, and this is from one of our projects where we specified the downlights as we normally would, and there was a duct in where we wanted to put the recessed downlights, and so the contractor, without consulting us, said, "You know what? I know what to do. I'll do what we always do. We'll put it in between, and then it will light both the counter and the kitchen island." And I stood there in that in that aisle with the builder, and I said, "Here's the problem with the approach that you did without consulting us. You just moved the light, like in a closet, to where it actually is more concentrated on the floor than any of the spaces we actually use in a kitchen." We see this on multi-million-dollar houses every week. It's like it has nothing to do with how people use the space and everything to do with how easy it is to put a line in between and put circles on a plan. And I stood there with the contractor and I said, "Okay, let's, hold out your hand." I held out my hand on the counter and I said, "See, that's my shadow from the light that you moved," and then turned around to the other side and said, "See, that's my shadow from the light that you moved." And what do? Well, without ripping out the drywall, we couldn't fix the upper cabinets. The upper cabinets now are dark. They're not as bright as they could be. They did end up taking the upper cabinets down, sending them back to the manufacturer, routing a second row of under cabinet task lights so that we could at least get enough light on the countertop. If these recessed downlights had been in the right place, we wouldn't have had to do that. And that's why we call them sins, right? Overhead dependency. Here's another thing I want you to keep your eye out for when you're looking at lighting and getting into lighting and seeing photographs of architecture, etc. Look at them and say, okay, what time of day is it? Right? They've got the lights turned on here. I'm not sure why, but it certainly isn't because they need the lights, right? It's just so that it looks good in the photograph. They put a grid of downlights up here. Every light source in here is above your head. It's on the ceiling, except the fire. So they turn that on to make it look nice, even though it's clearly good weather outside because they've got, it looks like summer to me. I'm not sure they need that fire other than aesthetics. So here we have overhead dependency. And what does that mean? It kind of means that nothing changes. The light is always coming from above. Now, if you can imagine living in nature and going outside, and the sun was always at summer 12 o'clock, right? It's right up above you all the time. And the sun never set. It never went down. It never went up. Our bodies aren't designed. Our bodies aren't, adapted to that kind of life. It gets old. We get eye strain. We get fatigue. And we miss out on the benefits of light and health when everything comes from the ceiling. And we see a lot of lighting plans that way, where it's like, well, what is your lighting design that you have? Well, it's actually a layout of 100 recessed lighting fixtures. 90 of them are in the wrong place. 10 of them are in the right place. And that may be a good start, but if you've heard any lighting designer talk, it's usually about layers of light, right? And that's, we have our red velvet cake analogy, so you remember layers. That's part of the reason we talk about it, is because so many, you just can't have good lighting when it's overhead dependent, when it's only coming from the overhead. Now let's talk binary existence. I wanted to name this after some sort of Star Wars thing. Binary Sunset is one of the songs, one of the sort of the epic ballads of my generation, I suppose. What is binary existence? Now, fortunately, if our clients are coming to you for controls, they aren't necessarily getting binary existence. But binary existence for us is when there are one or two switches or dimmers in a space. It's like you got a 1 or a 2, or a 0 or a 1. And basically what it means is you got on and you got off. Those are your choices. You got on and you got off. That's it. So when you do that, you severely limit the capabilities of the user to have a space that works for them at any given point of time, at any given mood, etc. So you know to put dimmers on it. You know that that's necessary. Unfortunately, I don't have to. I'm preaching to the choir on the terms, in this case, so I won't belabor binary existence. Here's another one: depth of details. You can see there's I'm in this. We're doing a mock-up at this house. This is a friend of ours, and they thought about lighting, and they said let's put some cool lighting in here. We'll put it on top of the trusses that we had, hand made and assembled with pegs. This beautiful timber frame. We'll put the light on top of them, so that your eye is drawn to the drywall, the speaker, the jack and wire that go to the speaker. And it's like, why'd you go to all the work to have these details and put the light on the stuff you actually don't want to see? Who thought about this? Who thought this through? It's like, well, there was a level space, so we put a light on it, right? This is what we call depth of details. And you see this all the time in homes where there's a grid of downlights, a grid of recessed downlights, and nothing else in the space. So first of all, you got your downlight in the wrong spot here. And Russell liked this because instead of one downlight, I think we need to have two. So we'll move them off to the side. We'll get them in there. Yes, it'll be double the amount of fixtures for your sale. But then we'll call attention to the ceiling as well, right? We'll call attention to the coffered ceiling, the tongue and groove ceiling, the details, whatever the architectural details are, and they're different in every house. Modern house is going to have one kind of detail that's going to be very different than a traditional kind of house. But most lighting layouts ignore them completely. They have nothing to do with the actual house that's being built or the people living them. And most of these boil down to one sin that I'm going to call geometry versus humanity. It is the rule of the center line being more important than the person who is going to live in and use that space. And I can tell you that geometry versus humanity, a straight grid of downlights, is perfect for a gas station canopy. And many, many homes are lit exactly like a gas station canopy. That's great, but it's not really for anyone, right? It's just not. So avoid it if you would. So what is geometry versus humanity? It basically says, we don't care what happens in the space. We don't care if it's, a couch, if it's a living room, if it's an office, if it's a bedroom. We put the same lighting layout in there. It has nothing to do with the humans who are going to be using that space. One of the manufacturers 20 years ago that I first came in touch with had a brochure, and it said their title was Lighting for People. And it's like, this was like a revolution. And we're like, who have we been lighting for beforehand? Well, we've been lighting for carpet, we've been lighting for floors, we've been lighting for easy install, but we haven't been lighting for people, so they had to make a brochure to explain that concept. And the truth is, 20 years later, we're still doing it. And to give you an example of lighting layout, here's a poster child. It's a multi-million-dollar house that we worked on. This was the plan that came to us before we did our work on it. And you can see that they were very good at finding center lines. They were very good at laying out circles on a plan. This is what we call lighting layout. And it in essence embodies that geometry versus humanity. But you can see 4 cans and a fan. Oh, it's a bigger bedroom, then we spread the cans out a little bit more. Oh, it's even bigger, than we might put 6 cans into the bedroom, right? Oh, we've got a room here. Well, let's look at the center lines in this room. That's great. That gives us a place for 9 cans. Oh, let's look at this room that's it's a third of the ceiling height and a half of the physical size. Well, the center lines tell us we need 9 cans in there. So we need 9 cans in here and 9 cans in here. And they're completely different spaces. And we've got timber frames that are completely ignored. Like, this is what we see on high-end homes over and over and over and over again. And it has nothing to do with how humans live in the space. I mean, you can also see vanity and sanity here we're going to get the deep shadows over people's faces there. And I would say that this boils down to the unforgivable sins of ignorance and atrophy. And I don't mean ignorance in a bad way. I mean, people just don't know better. They've actually never had anyone explain to them or show them, better yet, show them. You know, my wife accuses me of mansplaining all the time. So don't mansplain or womansplain. Show them what good lighting can do. Let's get rid of the ignorance that's out there in the client base and in the world so that we can help them get better lighting. And by atrophy, I mean, we've been doing lighting in high-end residential and in commercial roughly the same way for 50 years. And so we think that's the way it should be done. Now, there were thousands of years before that we didn't do it that way, and who knows how many years there will be after that we hopefully don't do it that way. But just because we did it that way 5 years ago or last year doesn't mean we should do it again. In fact, if you're doing the lighting the same way you did it last year, you're out of date. Because the lighting revolution has been so phenomenal and so encompassing that companies like DMF remade themselves into essentially, this entirely new organism to be current, to stay current. And there's new product that they're rolling out now. And that's not just DMF, it's every manufacturer who's going to be viable because they recognize that the future and that now is different than 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago. But the building industry is very, very slow to adapt, and so they just kind of stick around with those 9 deadly sins. And what we end up with in the end is mediocrity. It just means, yep, there's light in the space. There's gas station canopy lighting in every room in the house. No one's going to complain that it's too dark because it's actually too bright and too glary. So what will they do? They'll come in and maybe they'll dim the lights, or maybe they'll turn them off and put in lamps because, I hear so many people say, I don't like downlighting. I'm like, no, that's not the case. You don't like bad downlighting, right? Recessed downlights, they're one of the most used tools in a good lighting design, but you can use them poorly as well. You can put them in the wrong place. You can have these 9 deadly sins of lighting layout, and you can totally miss out on the opportunity and be stuck in what most of us experience, which is mediocrity. And so, this is my sermon. I'll pass the hat around, Russ, if you'll take a donation, right? Right. If we could do that, that would be kind of fun. And I suppose I should have, some kind of a moment here to have people confess their sins. But that's what I've got, and I'll turn it back to you, Russ, for whatever's next.
Sure. Well, why don't we open up to some questions? You shared the most common mistakes people are making. I don't know if folks want to know what some of those solutions are or have any other questions for you or for DMF. We're happy to take some questions.
Yeah, and I see one in the chat from Andrew. Out of curiosity, is there a book or reference you'd recommend for a deeper dive? Also, any chance we'll be able to obtain this presentation? Ask Rust. He's recording it for the presentation. Books, to be honest with you, I get asked this question a lot, and I don't have a good answer for you. And the reason for that is there are 2 kinds of lighting books out there in general. There are textbooks that tell you all about foot candles and lux and all the kind of technical things, and they cost $100 and they're really dry and they're probably out of date. And then the other kind of books are really about, let me show you some really pretty pictures of houses with nice decorative fixtures and good lighting, but we won't actually teach you anything. And so, how do you learn to do this? How do you learn? Rocky Mountain Lighting Academy, there's a multi-day course for that. And of course, you should go to my blog because I don't keep any secrets. So if you go to languageoflight.blog, I put a lot of my theory and stuff there. But I wish I had a good book. I'm a fan of the Not So Big House series and there's a few chapters in there in terms of light to walk towards and pulling focus with light. But as far as a complete book, I wish I had one. I don't know, Russ, if you've got a resource that you go to for this kind of thing.
Well, we usually turn to a professional like yourself, where we've got a couple of lighting designers in house as well that have gone through the work of really becoming accomplished experts in this field, and that's kind of been my go-to. In terms of the actual presentation, yes, I'm recording this, and we'll post a link on our CEDIA booth in about an hour or so.
Awesome. Any other questions? Type them in or speak now or forever hold your peace. Right. Right. I didn't really leave room for questions. So let me say thanks to Russ and DMF for having me at this piece. Thanks, Ian, for the compliment, and Mike and Dan. I did get a private question now, and maybe we can wrap with that. What's the solution to vanity and sanity? The tools we have now for to fix vanity and sanity are more than we used to have. But you want to think about, for me, it helps me to think about the quintessential Hollywood dressing room mirror. What does it look like? They put them in films, they put them in movies, backstage mirrors. It has a row of light bulbs all the way around it, right? Below, on the side, up above. Now, nobody's going to do that in their house, but most of you have opportunity to do that in a mirror. With a very similar effect. But what you want is soft light, especially from the sides, fairly close into the face. If it's a big, wide mirror, then we try to put something in the middle of that mirror as well. But soft light on both sides of the face is what's hitting me now because I have lamps right here and here. And that's what's going to allow you to look the best. We also put a light behind the person so that the head, the hair and the shoulders are drawn out from the background, so you can see what my head looks like. And if I turn that light off, you can see how the definition there is lost on the shoulders and on the head. So anybody that has hair or shoulders might like that light source as well. So good question.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining. Please do visit the DMF Lounge. We've got one of our trained professionals there that will speak to you one-on-one, or whoever's in the lounge, answer any in-depth questions. And also wanted to give a big thank you to David. Always a pleasure to hear you present, David. Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. And thanks, everybody, for coming.